Sonic the Hedgehog is a freak of nature who, by the very essence of the definition, shouldn't exist. As it stands, time and time again, this 3-foot hedgehog manages to stop the most intellectual being on the planet, eldritch abominations, literal gods, and being so far out of the realm of understanding that the average person would cower in fear at the mere mention of something so terrifying. Yet here, he stands at the forefront of it all every single time, ready to take on whatever adventure is presented to him, with no worry about what self-inflicted costs may be. We're much overdue for an analysis of the hero who lit our hearts and passions ablaze almost 35 years ago. Let's get started.
Do you know who I am?
Throughout the various mediums available to us for this research study, seldom does one go into the intricacies of how Sonic the Hedgehog came to be the speed demon we know him as today. Some say that it's just the way he was born as a result of genetic mutations, which the series is obviously no stranger to. I mean, we have a rabbit that can fly with her ears, a kid fox that has 2 tails, and an echidna with 2 claws on each of his gloves. Sonic the Hedgehog as a franchise is meant to take animals that people wouldn't normally think about and turn them into something cool and interesting, all the while teaching everyone about their real life attributes. To my knowledge, no one's ever mentioned it, but have you ever realized the intention behind why Tails chases after a hedgehog in Sonic 2 and 3? Foxes eat hedgehogs, sometimes. If that's not some kind of sick and twisted symbolism, then I don't know what. Anyway, forced metaphors aside, what I'm trying to say is this. Sometimes things just happen, right? Not with Sonic. With Sonic the Hedgehog, he feels very intentional, and I'm not speaking about from a real-world creative perspective. Aside from the well-documented events like the echidnas being wiped out by perfect chaos, we don't know much about the world that Sonic inhabits before the situation in the very first game happens. Were there factions causing chaos before then? Who was in the right and who was in the wrong? What was the ultimate goal of each side? All of these questions and not enough answers, but one thing is for certain. None of them required the entity known as Sonic the Hedgehog to be born yet. Chances are, all of the highly plausible questions I posed actually did happen, but those were the things that the world herself felt needed to happen in order for progress and evolution to be made. We're all aware of the idea that evolution is survival of the fittest, correct? And that certain events or circumstances are required in order for balance to either be achieved or restored, yes? Perfect. Now, what if I brought to your attention Newton's third law of motion? Just stick with me, I promise that I'm in the kitchen and the meal is almost done. And the fact that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The previous events of the world did not need a Sonic, but the advent of one singular and maniacal individual is what springs everything into action for both us and the series that we love so much.
Get a load of this!
You can't talk about Sonic without also mentioning Eggman in the same breath. These two are opposite sides of the same coin, and aside from appearance, are identical in every way. I'd like to quickly shout out this awesome creator, Boy, who does an excellent breakdown of Eggman's character, so be sure to check him out after you're done here. The thing about Eggman is that he takes the Thanos approach to things, where he wants the world to thrive and be beneficial for those inhabiting it, but goes about it in such a twisted way that we simply can't help but portray him as the villain in our minds. To break this down, he believes that the fleeting life force of organic creatures is a waste of talent that some may naturally possess, and ultimately wants to turn every living thing into a robot so that he may oversee or rule them in his perfect image. This, theoretically, would allow for much better standards of living and an infinite lifetime of productivity, which sounds great. Unless your name is Mother Nature. As previously stated, everything happens for a reason, both in Sonic's world and ours. We may not always like it, but that is the way that things work out, and it's the job of those who want to see the change to create it. Sonic the Hedgehog is that change. It wouldn't be far-fetched, given the nature of his world and everything us as players have experienced, that Sonic would come to be as a result of the rising threat of Eggman. Perhaps the world bound both the hero and villain together by fate to forever clash in the name of balance? The fact that Sonic 1 throws us into the fray immediately is, yes, also just a limit of hardware at the time most likely, but also a potential nod to the fact that Sonic knows instinctively that it's his job to stop Eggman at every possible turn, and that Eggman knows he must attempt to halt Sonic's efforts to stop him. It's the classic case of an immovable object coming into contact with an unstoppable force, with the outcome being an endless feud of clashing over and over and over and over again. Funnily enough, when you sit back and think about it, Eggman's drive for his dream are stemmed from utilizing his unique intellect to come to the conclusion that roboticizing everything is the only way to change fate. And Sonic's drive for his dream to have all things keep their choices and freedom is a direct result of the power and privilege allotted to him. Like I said, 2 sides of the same coin. Just different takes on life based on how their respective gifts shape their experiences. I'm curious to see if everyone thinks that Sonic and Eggman are bound by some strange supernatural entanglement that will force them to always be at each other's throats, or if it's just a matter of coincidence. Let me know. Life has a funny way of insinuating that something is just not meant to be, and you can go about it one of 2 ways. 1. Lie down and accept it, or 2. Continue to face it head on every day no matter what form the obstacle manifests as. Let's backtrack a bit here and take a look at the point made earlier in the video about a few of Sonic's other characters who have notable abilities and attributes. I'll be making a case for 2 specific categories of said characters and explain why Sonic fits into neither of them. Starting off, we have the "yeah, that makes sense" category. Under this microscope, we'll be taking a glance at Knuckles, Amy, and Tails/Cream, and how their genetic disposition or affinity for certain talents is possible from a quote-unquote real-life standpoint. Out of all these examples, I want to focus on Knuckles first. The Red Echidna's tribe is heavily influenced by ancient tribes that you see in our world, where there is once again an emphasis on the strong surviving. To me, it's no-brainer that, as the last Echidna, Knuckles would have the benefit of being the result of 1,000 years of strength passed down from one generation to the next, allowing for the unnatural physical prowess that he possesses. A tribe that, even if just barely, made it through near total annihilation, had to hone in on making sure their name and history lived on in some way, and it all fell on the shoulder of one person. Moving on over to Amy, it's become more of a talking point recently. Her affinity for everything relating to spirits, tarot card readings, and the supernatural also makes sense from a quote-unquote real-life standpoint. I'm sure most people have had something of a supernatural experience at one point or another in their lifetime, or they at least know somebody that has. With energy being a very real thing, it's not hard to believe that some are more in tune with that than others and can tap into said energy easier. Lastly, we have Tails and Cream. These two make the most sense as there are people with genetic mutations everywhere. Tails having, well, 2 tails, and Cream having huge ears aren't unbelievable by any sense of the word. My ears may be longer than yours, or your arms may be shorter than mine. Now, the fact that these two can fly with them is a different story, but that's where the suspension of disbelief comes into play. Next up, we have the category of, okay, so this was with a purpose. And these are characters that have their abilities due to a specific life mission, somewhat akin to Sonic, more so from the fact that they are here to fill in gaps. Stick with me for a sec. Speaking of which, the contestants here are Shadow, Silver, and Blaze. Ironically, all being Sonic's rivals at one point or another. Our favorite and most current star up to bat, Shadow, is first. He's gotten lore dumps left and right this entire year, but I think the conversation around him can best be summarized once again by Omega and Shadow generations. He was made, by numerous trials and tribulations, to be the ultimate life form, one unmatched by anything else on this plane of existence in all manners in order to solve Maria's and by extension the world's problems. Yet, he is equaled and even surpassed in some cases by a blue hedgehog that underwent none of what he did and gives out hope to all that he comes across. Silver, being our next candidate, is similar to Sonic, but not in the same avenue as Shadow. With him being born in the far-off future, Silver seems to be another case of nature choosing its hero to champion her efforts. The only difference is, Silver was never given the chance to experience what his power could do in a non-committal way, only as a responsibility. Whereas Sonic feels naturally that it's right to stop Eggman at all costs, Silver completes his duties out of obligation, and that he's the only one able to do so in his damaged future. That's why it takes Sonic and his crew in every medium Silver first appears into them to reel in the white hedgehog out of that headspace and into a completely different one. Finally, we have Blaze. She is a sole anomaly amongst these two categories, as she was originally supposed to be her dimension's version of Sonic, but also a mix of Knuckles with her guarding the Soul Emeralds and Shadow with the responsibility of carrying out the wishes of her people. The lack of exploration of Blaze's world outside of Sonic Rush Adventure and the other characters in it leads me to believe that she is the embodiment of all three into one person. There have been instances across games and comics alike that shows Blaze having more than a surface level connection with Sonic, Knuckles, and Shadow that back this point up as well. She exists in her world where the others do not in order to fulfill those roles, which only further supports her initial attitude in the original Sonic Rush of understanding that she needs to carry the weight of the world alone on her shoulders. So, with all that being said, Sonic can be seen as the world's answer to most problems that have already or will eventually happen. Unlike most of the other characters, Sonic's role is to allow others the freedom allotted to him. It's not to protect the relics of his lost civilization, upkeep a promise to a deceased friend, or even go back and fix the mistakes of those before him. He wasn't engineered to do any of this, and seemingly has been willed into existence as this unstoppable, yet just, force by the very world that he just so chooses to protect. He's the only one that could stop the End and Frontiers, the only one foretold by the Echidna's murals to stop Eggman, and the only one who could show others that just because you may have been born to do a specific thing, doesn't mean that you can't course correct and do what's right for you. Sonic the Hedgehog is a force of nature who by the very essence of the definition should exist, and I know that we're all glad that he does. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope at least someone was able to catch the comparison of that last line to the first one at the beginning of the video, and if not, then it's okay. Wanted to very quickly say thank you all for getting me to 100 plus subscribers. I reached this not too long after the video last week, but wanted to appropriately thank everyone in a format that I'm sure you'd all see. I appreciate all the comments, whether they're cordial debates, telling me how much you like the videos, or if it's just us theory crafting about the subject of the content. I also appreciate the likes and dislikes even though YouTube doesn't show them, because it lets me know that there's always room for improvement. Not to take up too much more of your time, but once again from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'll continue to improve and bring worthwhile topics to you, so stick around for that if the ride fancies you enough. If you enjoyed this video about how Sonic maybe should or shouldn't exist though, then I'm sure you'll enjoy this one about how silver would fare in Sonic's shoes. I'll catch you next time.